Welcome to the Take 92 podcast. My name is Sammy Warm Hands. I'm your host. And today I'm very excited to welcome a guest that I've had in rotation at my house since the late 90s, Theo Kogan from the Lunachicks. Theo and I are going to talk about their new book, FALLOPIAN Rhapsody, the band's comeback, their history, and so much more. We had a limited time to talk, but I think we got a lot out of it. I cannot recommend their new book enough. Stay tuned. This is Theo Kogan.
Hello.
Thank you so much for doing the show. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I looked at my record shelf today. You guys were actually the first female artists at all that I ever bought. First CD I ever bought.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so I just remember being blown away by the sense of humor and the lyrics. And you guys are doing both things that are conscious, or like you guys kind of talked about being like almost accidental feminists in there, but also fucking around just as much. And picking up the book, I knew absolutely nothing about you guys, really, beyond what was on the record covers.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I think it's really cool how you guys all came together and kind of told the stories as a group. You know, I had Lou from Sick of It All last year, and they did it in a similar way, but I just really couldn't believe it. I didn't realize you guys came from, you were around the early hardcore scene in the 80s, and, you know, CBs and Danceteria, and like things I read about in the Beastie Boys book, or the Agnostic Front Roger Merritt book, you know. What have the fans reacted to the most from putting this story out there? Were there other people like me who were like, whoa, I thought you guys were a 90s band. I didn't realize it went back so deep.
I mean, not so much there, but the reaction has been just incredible, where people are just pouring out with love on the internet, just saying how much they related to it and that it helped them, or we've gotten plenty of emails saying that our music helped people through hard times and things like that. And so being able to tell this story with the distance that we had, and also, you know, the fact that, like, and I'm sure in those other books too, like New York is sort of another character because it's New York, and there was and still is so much going on. It was a pretty special time to be a teenager and have all that going on in all these different facets of the city. And, you know, Danceteria was, it was like, I was telling somebody actually today that I used to get in there when I think I was like 14. That's when I started going. Yeah. And then like the drinking age here, I think was 18. And then it changed. It moved up to 21 when I was 15. And suddenly I couldn't get in because they were carding. And I was like, but I got here when I was 14. What's the problem?
Yeah.
But it was pretty funny. So yeah, and without having, you know, all this digital tracking that we have now on phones and everything else, like you were really, once you left the house, you did what you wanted to and no one would know. Yeah. That was a gift, I guess, in a way. You know, and in some ways it's like, it's great that we have so many ways to find each other and be seen and be safe and all that stuff. But I mean, I'm glad I grew up when we grew up. It was a fun time.
Yeah, and just as a fan, I mean, it was, because back then there was no social media, you know, the internet's kind of downloading songs or something like that. You're not getting a ton of information.
Right.
And so
it
was exciting for me, and, you know, seeing all you guys kind of had different formative experience, kind of the epiphany of like, oh wow, I could see myself doing this. Like you talked about seeing a band called Frightwig. What was that show like? Why was that important to you?
I just walked in and it was everything that I needed to see at that moment, and it, like my jaw dropped to the floor. It's like two of them looked like they had like, who knows if this is even what was really happening or if this is just what my memory has done, but I saw like these giant, like sort of gauzy, long tutu kind of skirts, but very like, you know, black. And then one of them had like a giant veil over her face, but had like this bright red hair. And they were just going nuts. And then the drummer was this like larger than life, like Barbie doll in jeans and a t-shirt, who was like stunningly gorgeous and was just like amazing at playing and didn't give a shit. And then at some point they all switched instruments, and then I was just like, okay, now I'm dead. Like, this is incredible. I don't know if I had their record already. They had this record that I listened to all the time. And yeah, and that was like my sort of defining moment of like, if they can do this, I think I could do this. That was my like jaw-dropping, like light bulb moment, seeing them.
Yeah, I like how you guys were all best friends. You sort of played instruments, but didn't think of it in terms of like, oh, I'm going to learn this instrument so I can be in a band. It kind of just happened over each of you seeing this sort of like aha moment that, oh, shit, we should do that. And I think a lot of us can relate to starting a band just with your best friends before anyone knows how to play, just because that's what you love to do and you're always together. I like that you mentioned the clothing thing because there's a section in here about, I think the quote was aggressively absurd custom clothing that you guys went after. There was a line that says, we planned our tour dates around thrift stores. And that hit me because I do the same thing for record stores, first thing in town. All right, how much time to sound check? How many record shops can we hit, And
exactly.
I love how way later in the story that came in handy where you guys were touring Japan and all of your merch was lost and you guys actually had to make in the hotel room all your merch from scratch, basically.
Yeah, we bought a whole bunch of white t-shirts and a whole bunch of like Sharpies and paint pens and whatever we could find. And literally, I mean, we have photos that I don't know why they didn't make it in the book, but I guess they're not the greatest photos. But we have photos of these, in Japan also, like your hotel rooms are very small. So it was like, we made like a sweatshop in one hotel room where it was like we would draw, then somebody would like, maybe there was puffy paint involved too, so there's somebody was like blow drying and then somebody else was hanging it up. Like me and Gina were doing all the art. But yeah, God, I would love to see some of those shirts because hopefully there's some floating around. But each one was a masterpiece.
Yeah, I wonder
very fun.
Like if people even know how rare that shit was, or if they just thought like, oh yeah, this American band has weird merch,
I know, hard to say.
Now, one of the biggest shocks in this, and there's a lot in the book that, you'll get tons of people you didn't expect to see there. Alice Cooper, Joan Jett, Howard Stern, recording with Debbie Harry. There's all kinds of crazy surprises. But in terms of your guys' origins, there's a line that sums it up from Gina where she says, so after a couple of more shows, we had a record deal. And it seems like you guys sort of almost had this fantasy start that was too good to be true. Mm-hmm. Because you talked about it was Sonic Youth that signed you guys. And sounds like you were straight fighting their audience when you actually played together. But was that before or after they brought you on?
I think that must have been after, since like they, Kim and Thurston came to it was like our second or third show ever. So I think the show when we opened for them was after that. And I never thought about the fact until much later, like maybe around beginning to write this book, that we were signed after a couple of shows. And they brought us to an English label they were working with called Blast First. And the guy, his name is Paul Smith. And, I guess because it wasn't some big American label, like it seemed like, oh my God, wow, cool. Like this is happening. But it didn't seem as monumental as it seems now, where it's like, we got signed after a second or third show. Like that's insane, and we could barely play. So, looking back on it, it's more sort of mind-blowing. But at the time, it was also like, oh my God, this is really happening, So it was super exciting, but we were also teenagers and we were like shitheads. So, it's like, we were like, of course we're getting signed, like we're amazing. And also had this vision of what we were supposed to sound like, which was not what the vision that Kim and Thurston had for us sounding like. So that was our like first, artistic difference moment with people we were working with, which was kind of hilarious, really, because they thought, we were trying to be a noise band when we were really trying to like be an amazing like arena rock band or something.
And it kind of sets like one of the first themes of the book in that you have all these interactions that you guys are just a band, but then you start to realize, oh no, the perception is we're the girl band. And there was sort of like a tokenism about when you would get opportunities, you were like, oh, so now people around the scene don't like us because we got this record deal, but then the people who signed us just see us as a girl band and want to package us and present us in this way. And I couldn't believe how many times that came up through this whole thing of like people just really wanting to dismiss your own vision and package you, sell you in a different way.
Yep. I mean, it happens all the time. And I'm a makeup artist now, and I work with bands, like not constantly, but I do. And just the things that I see when, especially with major labels, of how they want, especially the women, but the guys too, to look a certain way, to wear a certain thing, and then watching some of these artists sort of fight it or just go along with it or whatever it is. It's just like, nobody could have told us. Like, anybody, and I think people could sort of smell that from a mile away if you looked at us or saw us, but we were sort of like, everyone loved us. All these label people loved us. It was like we played with everybody. And then everyone was just like too afraid of our power or our humor or whatever it was. And the fact that, we were women on top of it. It's just like, we never looked at it. We were just like, we're people who are going to play music. We didn't think of it in starting. We didn't think like, oh, we're making an all-female band. We were just like, we're best friends and we're going to do this. Like, it'll be cool. Why not? And who else would we do it with? You know? It is unfortunate. And that shit still goes on. I hear from bands today that are newer and younger, and it's still the same old shit. And it's really a bummer. And I really hope that it will change. I do see more female bands getting signed, which I think is great. But it's crazy how far, we practically have flying cars, and still people are like, oh, do you play bass? It's like, or do you, like, is that your guitar?
Yeah, is it your boyfriend's band?
Exactly. Even when in the Skyscrapers, which was like me and 3 guys, one of them being my husband, and we would load into a club, and we were full DIY, bringing everything in, and I was carrying merch and setting it up, and someone's like, oh, you're the girlfriend? And I'm like, I'm Theo. That's on this t-shirt, but it's really sad. That's really what it is, and it needs to change, and hopefully it will.
That reminds me of, I think it was Monique Powell from Save Ferris. I forget exactly, but my friend made a documentary about the ska scene in the 90s, and there was a story just like that where the bouncer wouldn't let her in. Like, she went out to get ready. Okay, it's showtime. I'm walking back into the building, and the bouncer wouldn't let her in. Like, no, like, show's sold out. Sorry, you can't come in. She's like, no, I'm on the my face is on the flyer, dude. But one of my favorite chapters in the book, maybe my favorite chapter, is all the stories of you guys kind of stirring up shit and fighting back at the shows. It's called Close Encounters of the Turd Kind, which already is a winner, but you were kind of tasked with, it seemed like, kind of policing the crowd. I've done that before, where like if a fight breaks out, you stop playing, hey, get that fucking guy out of here. But it sounds like that was regular for you, that you were having to look out for people and make sure that all of your fans, who are a lot of young girls, aren't getting smashed in there.
Yeah.
I think my favorite part of that you had a bit, I guess, a recurring bit, where a heckler would yell out, you would say, come here and say it into the mic, and then you'd knock him in the head with it.
Yes.
That shit was great. What do you remember about kind of falling into that role of having to dictate the crowd when you're up there just playing a punk set?
Well, having been a kid who went to punk shows, and like I got smashed, like people would just, like, big dudes would just throw you on literally like into the pit, you know, and I hated that. And once I was on stage, like at our shows, that kind of stuff, for the most part, wouldn't happen. It would here and there. But when we were on tour with bigger bands that were guys that were on the radio and things like that, like when we were on tour with Offspring and Rancid, it just drew a crowd that didn't know us, that didn't want to see a bunch of girls get up on stage. And immediately, we're just like, oh, wanted to mess with us and say, show us your tits. So call it like New York instinct. I don't know. But it was like, once I did it once and got like, and it's like, I don't want to hurt people, but you know what? Some people are that stupid that they need to be knocked in the head. And when I knocked them in the head, because with the microphone too, it's made this great sound. It's like, and then immediately everybody was like, the crowd screams. And then a little violence was what sort of made them go, oh, wow, they're cool. You know? And honestly, I don't know what else would have made them stop. Sometimes it would just be like, they would get a crowd going, show us your tits. And it's like, to reduce people to boobs and vaginas just because they have them on the stage, it's just so fucked up. And being on stage was like, okay, now this is the safe space. So when that wall was broken down, then it was just like, it was like letting the lion out of the cage. I mean, that's kind of, you know, how I could really describe it. It was just like, not in my house, you know?
Yeah, I mean, and I imagine also just with your guys' on-stage personas, with your costumes and makeup and all this shit, that when there's some creep in the crowd and Sid knocks him out with her bass, that the crowd is like, oh shit, this ain't a joke. They're not fucking around, you know?
Yes, exactly.
Now, of course, there's stuff in here that I think any musician could relate to. I love the bit about sleeping upright in your seats in the van, because that was that was my first tour, was my band. We were sitting at fucking rest stops, just fully upright with all the amps pressed up behind our seats.
Yep.
I think the most unbelievable, because I've had every breakdown I think I could imagine, but your engine fell out of you. It was like a rental van, I think.
Yeah.
That actually came out while you were on the road?
Yes, it fell out.
That shit's insane. I did have a wheel come off once while on the interstate, going pretty fast. We're just watching it bounce between the median and then the other lane of traffic and go into the trees. I'm like, uh-oh.
Did you crash? You must have.
No, actually.
No.
There was this just huge grass median, so we were able to turn into it, and it was totally fine. It was just really fucking scary. The whole thing's rattling like crazy, you know, like you're in the dryer or something. Now, Gina's tour revelation really connected to me in that, you know, you're out there, you're staying with sketchy people you just met because you don't have any money, and you know, sleeping on floors, and you're not eating well, and you're flying into the next town only to just get to the show and then drive to the next place. I mean, it is a physical grind. And when she has this, like, is this really what it boils down to? Like, all of this work, and people see it really as like, oh, you're going on tour, it's a vacation. It's not glamorous, you know. It is a lot of endurance, and all this for just 45 minutes on stage. And I was like, yes, that I've had that exact feeling. But I also related to you talking about being away to preserve your voice. You know, that was another thing I talked to Lou about last year, of when you're the front man or the front woman in this case, you have everybody kind of depending on you, and so you can't be hanging out with everybody. Did you feel that sort of tour depression more so, or I guess in a different way, because you're not part of the gang? I'm surprised that didn't cause more conflict from what I read, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't, just because I was fine with taking care of myself, I guess, to an extent. I mean, there were certainly frustrations, and it was depressing, and there were times when I was like, damn, everybody's out, like, this fucking sucks. And there were times that, you know, I was just like, I know that if I am going to continue this and everybody's counting on me, then I have to shut up and go to sleep, or else, like, it's just going to be bad, you know? But yeah, there was definitely like a big loneliness there. And there were times when I was like, you know, I wouldn't say that I was resentful, but I was bummed.
Yeah.
There's one specific one that it's probably in the book that I just remember being in Europe, and like this club turned into from like punk show into dance party, and it was so loud and everybody was out doing stuff. And I was just like laying there just like with the boom, 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 trying to sleep, and just like, what am I doing? You know, it is very that. And then like the days off too, when you're like, you have to like a long drive and you have to go to the next place and you don't have a gig that night. even though there's like this sense of like, oh, phew, you know, I get to like rest my voice another night. But then it's also like, oh, now that's it. Like now we're just here together and we're doing nothing.
And I've lost my voice as many times in the van as I have on stage, probably more times in the van, because if you got an 8-hour drive and you're laughing and you're singing along to the whatever you're playing music, then I've just shredded my voice from that so many times. It's like, okay, stop fucking around. I gotta rest. We got a show in 2 hours.
Yeah. I mean, then I would just like take pillows from hotels, or motels, I should say, and make like a pillow fort on the floor, and then I would have like earplugs, eye mask, and then like a sweatshirt over my head. Just try to sleep through the whole drive and not talk. And in a way, that was sort of like an escape too, because then I didn't have to engage with anybody to even think about talking. You know, there's so much energy that you have to give as a front person too, as I'm sure you know. It's like it takes a lot, and it takes a lot out of you. So I feel like it's just I don't know, it takes a lot of energy and like psychic energy too.
And to kind of piggyback on that, another thing that I just really, really related to, you talking about the post-tour come down, the kind of depression that sits in when you have to go back to regular life, and you use that Superman Clark Kent analogy, and it's just so true. Of every time I went out on the road and then you come back to this shitty customer service job, it's like, man, people are cheering for you one night and then you're getting shit on the next day. And when people say humbling, they don't mean it like this, you know. It's like the ultimate. It's almost kind of humiliating in a way. Like
and there's nothing you can do, because you can't be like, Joe, don't you know who I am? Because no, they don't. They don't give a shit. They couldn't care less. You're just like, that was brutal. And I know that comedians get it, and other, you know, actors get it. Like people get it after doing, you know, movies and all these things. And it's something that is like a postpartum, right? You have this baby. And then you're like, you know, now what? And there is something to have to like also going, you know, being on and with people 24/7, and then coming back to like, you have to deal with your own thoughts, and then deal with your own thoughts mixed with this crazy transition of rock star to like, you know, another face on the street. It's just, it's a mind fuck.
Well, and there was a part in there even learning that some of your heroes, like the Runaways, having their own shitty jobs to go back to. And it's like, wait, so if if we're on this trajectory, and I'm thinking, okay, but if we just work a little harder, if we just play that tour, if we just get on this label or whatever, then it'll go away. And you find out you kind of don't escape it.
No, like the Runaways having those jobs, and then, you know, we're touring in the UK, and one of the vibrators is driving our van, and Peter and the Test Tube Babies drummer is doing our merch and everything. You know, it's just like everyone's just trying to get along, but you're like, but you're fucking rocks. You're like the shit, you know. And then they're just like, oh, it's just a shit life, you know. Just here we go, one day after another. I'm not on the dole, or I am on the dole, or whatever. That was another like slap in the face of like, these are like our heroes, and like, what the fuck, you know.
I wonder too about when you are doing these tours with all these great bands, some of them you mentioned, but like Vandals and Offspring, and, you know, they're your opener, and then they become the headliner, and then now they're taking you back out on the road, and that's very cool, and the reciprocal nature of that relationship is awesome. But I imagine, especially with kind of some of the girl band stuff we talked about with like, all these labels love us, but they won't sign us. There's got to be some weird sort of like, okay, well, everyone else in our scene is growing and hitting that next stage. Like, why are we left out of this? Yeah.
It felt like we're sort of like the stepchild, you know, of it all, you know, and then like all the other bands of that time, like L7 and Based in Toyland and Hole, and, you know, everyone was getting signed, and we were just like this sort of like, no one wanted to touch us. And then, you know, looking back on it, I understand why. You know, we were less accessible in a lot of ways. You know, we were untamable, I mean, not that those bands were tamed, but it's just, I don't know. I think the humor thing just added this other layer of like, we don't know what this is for those people, you know?
Yeah, and I get that too.
We couldn't help it. That's who we were and who we are. We're fucking funny. We can't, I don't know. I don't get it. But yeah. I get it.
I mean, I am where I am in my career, but there have been countless times people have said to me, "You're not really going to put that out, right?" I'm like, hell yeah, I am. That shit's funny. So, I mean, It's like you got to do it your way in the end. I mean, and you also sounds like butted heads with a lot of these people, not just Thurston, but I mean, kind of going on. I had Ryan Green on the show before. You did a record with him and Fat Mike. Sounds like that was really exciting, but then also didn't really align in terms of, like, no, we want to make a Lunachicks record, you know?
Right. And I love Mike. Like, he's a brother from another mother. But he has his thing, and he knows what he likes and what he believes. And, he did that as a favor, and that's amazing. And we're not a band where there's like one leader, and it's like everybody has an opinion. Everybody has a strong voice. Everybody has an opinion big time. And so there, and it wasn't like we had some like production meeting beforehand. It's just like we flew out there and went and did it. And that's, I'm not surprised that should happen. Ryan was great. And it was also like, okay, well, let's like learn from Fat Mike, who has sold a lot of records and has his own label and all this stuff. Like, okay, let's see how it pans out. Let's listen to him a little bit. But at the same time, we also needed to stay true to ourselves. And that's something we definitely knew how to do. So I wouldn't take that experience back. It was great. And I'm grateful to him and Ryan for working with us and not kicking us out also. But everybody sees something differently, right? So if you're like looking at, a color, you see it one way and somebody else sees it another way. You think about your sound, you see it one way and other people see it their own way. So it makes sense why all of that happened. We're strong people and we're always gonna butt heads. It's one way or another, even with each other. It's like we're having the best time rehearsing and getting ready for the shows again. And, the old things come up where you sort of slip into your own roles. I mean, not entirely, certainly, but it's just very funny. And then just seeing how each of us is like so strong-willed, it's pretty amazing. It's funny too, because all of us like kind of have our own businesses in one way or another too. It's like we're not people that like to work for someone else.
Yeah, I feel that to my bones. I mean, the idea of working with some of my favorite producers is so amazing that it's one of those like, hey, we have this opportunity, you want to do it? Yes. But if I really thought about it, I've been self-producing my own shit forever at this point, and I don't know that I could be told, oh no, do it this way. Or like, I'm going to stop the tape because that wasn't, I don't know. I feel like I might fight it exactly the same way.
Yeah, that's integrity.
Around that time in the story, you talk about some of these acting gigs, and I actually I think last year for the first time saw Bringing Out the Dead from Nick Cage and Scorsese. I didn't even realize that you were in it. What was that like? It was barely touched on there.
Oh man, that was so exciting. Like, acting is so hard for me. It's such a strange thing to be saying somebody else's words and, certainly becoming a character. I get it. But, I had a modeling agent and then an acting agent. And so I don't even remember how it came up. I was just doing a lot of stuff and this audition came up and I was, like whore number 1 or something or whore number 2.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh my God, it's like the Scorsese movie. It's like I've watched Goodfellas so many times. And he's just an incredible director. I mean, albeit incredibly sexist and fucked up as to women, but then it was like, I was so excited. And so I nailed the first audition, and then the second audition was with him. And
Wow.
I totally nailed that. And then I got the part, and it was just, it was like another, like, okay, like, if I get hit by a train tonight, that's okay. Like, I'm good. You know, like, yeah, that would be all right. And it was my first, like, big movie to do, too, because I had done plenty of, like, small and indie things. So it was, like, the first, like, big set. And I had a trailer and, you know.
Oh, nice.
You know, which is basically like a room in one of those things with, like, a bed.
Yeah, sure.
But the scene was with Nicolas Cage and John Goodman, and it was, my little mind was blown. It was very exciting. And, well, you know, that's everyone's least favorite movie of his, but I don't care.
I mean, it's a cool movie. Like, it's major, like, Taxi Driver vibes, you know, just kind of cruising around insomniac in the night and seeing what kind of shit comes up. But, yeah, I definitely want to watch it again now, knowing that you were in it.
And isn't Patricia Arquette in that too? And they were married at the time? Is that, I can't remember.
You know, I really only remembered Cage and Goodman because I watched like everyone else. I watched like 10,000 movies during, you know, lockdown last year. So
yes,
I do want to touch on Luxury Problem. I think this is one of the best albums of its time. It's phenomenal. Even the title, I mean, First World Problem is now like a buzzword phrase, and, you know, just the opening lyrics on the first song. I mean, again, I'm 13. This is shit I never thought about at all. And then you flip that and you're saying, like, I'll pierce my colon so my shit comes out like Play-Doh, and I'm like, okay, I'm sold. I mean, I used to practice singing to that record, like Coming Into Me and stuff like that, where you're really like showing off your range, and, you know, little 13-year-old me was singing along to that, cranked up my little speakers as loud as they would go, you know, trying to find my voice. And it was just, it was such a great record. And we talked a lot about touring. I think Nowhere Fast is probably the first time I ever heard a song about going out there and doing it, and that was the dream. You know, that was everything to me then as it is now. And, you know, every floor of every Motel 6 and just all these, there's so many great lines on that record. I will say that because it was late in your journey, this album has kind of the least coverage about it in the story. What else do you remember about that time? And in my opinion, you guys really being on top of your game creatively.
Yeah, I know. It is funny that doesn't... I mean, for me, that's my favorite album. And the song, Luxury Problem, when we're rehearsing right now, it's kind of my favorite song at the moment. It was like our zenith, you know? It was like we really hit all of our musicianship and songwriting, and everything just was like... the puzzle pieces just clicked together. You know, that was like sort of the vision from the beginning. Yeah. And it was actually happening, and that was amazing.
Was there any feeling that you guys were winding down at that time? And, like, I had that feeling a few years ago where I was like, dude, I can't do this grind shit all the time on the road anymore. You know, I'm going to make this record that's going to be like, I'm going to throw everything at it. This is going to be my best shit ever, you know, and I'm going to slow down a bit. I mean, did you have any sort of that, or did it just kind of accidentally happen that way?
It just accidentally happened. I think we made that record and it was incredible. And then, you know, maybe it was part of like our age and having been doing the road and everything for so long, and sort of reaching this point where it was like, is this going to get better or not?
Yeah.
You know, are we going to step up or not? And we'll never know because we decided to let it go for a while. But again, like, I really just feel like it all has happened the way it's supposed to. And again, that record, we did not think that was the end. It's just... Yeah. At all.
On one hand, it's like the best mic drop record you could have possibly had. And then on the other, it's like, what other potential is there? And so, you know, that's kind of the idea that I have in my head when you guys are coming back to the stage now. It's like, fuck yeah, I cannot wait to see this and you know, see where you guys take it next. I mean, I don't know, is this just going to be, you know, shows only, or is like the band back and who knows what's going to happen?
I mean, we are playing these shows, and then we would like to do some more shows since we've worked so hard to get our shit together.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's not going to be like jumping back into band touring, but I think that there will be some more shows, and, you know, we don't know if we're going to record stuff or make new music yet. Like, we're so concentrated on just getting our shit tight for these shows that it's hard to say. And you know, can we still write together? I don't know. I think we could, but that remains to be seen. But we also have a lot of music that never came out that, you know, we would like to put out there. So there's like, even, I mean, we have like demo tapes of shit that, like, there's some funny songs and some good songs that just never were put on anything. So there's a lot of opportunity. You know, people keep asking us to release everything on vinyl. Like, there's so much that needs to happen. So hopefully we'll get it all to happen. They're still very DIY.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I would love to hear some of that stuff. And you know, fingers crossed for a live DVD or Blu-ray or something from one of these comeback shows then. If that'd be awesome. I'd love to see it from afar.
Totally.
So last thing I wanted to ask you about, you know, one of the later tours that you guys did, it sounds like you did back-to-back Warped tours in 99 and 2000. I mean, I've heard everyone say, like, it sucks, but it's awesome. You know? I think, though, what stood out to me most about that was there was an interaction with Blink. I realize it was worded carefully, and I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but for me, as a 14-year-old, I was going to those shows. And I remember turning to my stepdad, because back then, you know, we'd have to have our parents drive us.
Yeah.
And I remember turning to him going, like, this is fucking stupid. And I have a certain sweet spot for it, but I never saw it through that lens of, you know, a lot of their fans are also my age then, middle school, high school girls.
Yep.
And so when they're calling for people to flash the crowd and this and that, it sounds like you were one of the only people who actually ever said anything, and I believe on stage, right?
Yeah. It was so disgusting to see them do that. And it's like, you know, there's so many levels to rock and roll, and like, these are fucking children.
Yeah.
You know, and these are like young women who they should fucking learn to respect themselves and learn to, you know, it's just like asking for that and getting it. It's wrong on every level. And I'm glad that you saw that as a young person, because it was too maddening to not say something about it. It was just gross. I mean, I've seen plenty of dumb shit from guy bands and like groupie stuff, and, you know, being on Warped Tour, it's just like there's tons of them. There's tons I didn't see, you know what I mean? And it was so much fun and all of the good stuff. But that's part of the problem of why people still say, oh, you're the girlfriend. You know, it's just like, it makes sense. Yeah, I know I want to punch somebody with a microphone just talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was great because, I mean, from the beginning of this book, like I said, that opening chapter, I swear to God, if anyone reads that chapter, they're going to read this whole fucking book. But, you know, you set the scene from the very beginning. You stay true to that the whole time. You guys have each other's backs. You don't take any shit. Again, I was a young kid who I loved both of you guys for your irreverence and your filthy sense of humor and shit. And so for me, even seeing a kind of a crack in the armor of the sort of vision you have of your favorite artist, you know, and me going, this is a little much, right? And hearing this perspective now, all these years later, I just thought that was great that you guys used your time on stage to actually be like, hey, by the way, don't put up with that shit. You guys in the crowd are better than that. And I just love that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, that is our show. Huge thanks to Theo for taking the time. I'll admit I was a little nervous going into this one. I've been a fan for a long time, and we had never met at all. So I really appreciate her coming on. I think it turned out great. I'm going to come back to you guys next time with The Last Gang from Fat Wreck. But for now, I'm going to say check out the new book, Fallopian Rhapsody by the Lunachicks. I'm going to leave you with a song, the title track from their classic album, Luxury Problem.
Can you believe it? How fucked up. Bruised knee, shit out of luck. Life sucks, my VCR broke. I'm all out of coffee, you're all out of smokes. Isn't it hard when you're spoiled rotten? Got another luxury problem. Drop the ball.